Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I thought today, why not do another little DIY project? Namely, we will be making some cheese today. In this case, I'm going to be making a hard, pretty much a classical Dutch style gouda cheese. And as you'll see, this is really nothing too difficult that can't be accomplished with, well, materials you already have lying around the house. Now, first thing, what we will need, that's going to be some milk. Now, what kind of milk? First of all, what you don't want is UHT treated milk from a supermarket. The structure is totally destroyed through the UHT process, so it won't coagulate. What I have here, it's about 10 liters of farm fresh milk. I do have a dairy farm just outside of town, and I just went and got 10 liters of raw milk. Pasteurized is also a possibility if you can't get a hold of raw milk. Like all the American people where, well, you can't stomach the awesomeness of raw milk. But I will be using raw milk to make some cheese. Furthermore, we want something that will bring some culture into our cheese, for which I found some nice cultured buttermilk. I want to speed up the process with some acid, so just some basic lemon juice, in this case from a bottle, because we don't really need the lemon juice. Some salt, and something you'll have to look for if you want a coagulated cheese is rennet. Now this is a bacteria culture that will help the cheese to coagulate, so this is something that you will need, is some rennet. As you'll see, again, very easy process. We'll start by filling up 2 kettles with our milk, and, well, furthermore, let's get cooking. We're about 5 minutes in, so I've heated my milk on the stove very lightly so that we can get a good 30 degrees. Thermometer is of course handy, but what you want, it's, well, a very light lukewarm temperature. So even if you don't have a thermometer, don't be too bothered by this. Making cheese is still an artisanal process, nothing scientific. Now I've added in this kettle and yet another one about 5.5 liters of milk. The farm lady has been generous, as I have already discovered a few times before. But we have distributed our milk and added to that about half a liter of buttermilk. This will also help to make our milk turn somewhat. But if we were to do this with just buttermilk, this will, well, take forever. So what we will be doing is adding a little bit of acid. There we go. Now we want to be aiming, at least for me, at about, there we go, and you already see the reaction. Our milk is starting to turn. So we want to be adding around about good 2 tablespoons per liter of milk. So just be a little gentle because our kettle is rather full. And this will help turn the milk. You want to keep it at round about this temperature. I'm in luck with this induction heater that I'm using. I do actually have a setting that allows me to basically keep our mixture at temperature. So what you want to keep pretty much your mixture at a steady temperature for about, I think it takes about half an hour to 45 minutes for the reaction to fully occur. After which, well, we can start indeed processing our young cheese. Well, as you can see, we're a few minutes after adding our acid and our milk is starting indeed to turn. Now one thing I nearly, oh, there we go, didn't mention, what we need, of course, next of all, well, that will be some rennet. Now this is indeed a bacterial culture that comes from a cow's stomach that will actually help our milk coagulate. Now it says here that I should use about 3-4 drops, 2, 3, 4 per liter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just 1 or 2 more for the half liter we have in there. Now this is going to help our cheese to, indeed, as you will see later on, coagulate, so that our cheese mixture will indeed start to, or our cheese curds will start to bind together and actually make for a nice compact pressed cheese. Well, we are about, I think, round about 40 minutes into our process, and as you can see, we have some reaction. So what you see on top, it's actually, well, pretty much a solid matter, no longer a liquid. Now the only thing we need to do, that is to, well, just leave the puns out of it, guys, but cut the cheese. Now what we need for that is a cheese cutter. Well, I've done this with a whisk. What I have these days, it's basically one of these gadget dealies they use to, or they sell to, there we go, cut up tomatoes. Never really found the use for that. I have good knives and knife skills, but it's ideally suited for this little task. So what we just want to do, as you can see, just move your cutter, there we go, straight through in every direction, and just cut up our cheese into curds. Now next thing that is going to happen is that our cheese will actually drop to the bottom and our rennet will remain on top. After which we can, well, wash and eventually press our cheese. Our solid matter has almost all of it sunk to the bottom, and what we are left with on top is our whey. Now what we will be doing now, very simple, we'll be actually pouring off as much as we can of the whey, and I want to actually rinse our cheese out with some hot water just to remove any excess acid that might still be left in there. We are again one step further, so it's time to actually rinse out our cheese. So first of all, we want to, of course, discard as much of the whey as we can. As you can see, what we're doing, we have this in a colander which we will pass it through. Well, normally you use a cheesecloth. What I use, these are very cheapo dishcloths that I bought when I started actually first time making cheese. These notoriously suck for doing dishes, but they're pretty coarse, so they are very good as a cheesecloth. And there we go. So we want to let this drain out, after which we can just grab a hold of the 4 ends and, well, just wring out as much of the moisture as we can. Until we are, well, left with as little or as dry of an amount of cheese as we can actually press out of there. Well, after we're done pressing, we have, well, inside here, as you can see, we already have a nice bit of homogeneous cheese, and seems it was pretty rich milk, because out of 10 liters I got about 2 kilos of cheese. Now I will let this, because there's still a lot of water in there, I'm going to let this drain inside the cheesecloth and inside the colander for about, I think, half an hour, 45 minutes more, after which, well, we can start pressing down our cheese. So we're now at the final phase of at least production of our cheese. That is to press our cheese down into a mold. Now what I'm using, this is something very simple, just an old plastic pot that I had laying around, in which I poked some holes. So in this we're going to place our cheesecloth, and in which we will indeed be putting down our cheese. Now we want to just slightly press this down into the mold so that we get as little chance as possible of having, we don't want a lot of air bubbles in there. And well, as by miracle, pretty much our cheese seems to be just about right enough to fill up our mold. Now the only thing we will be using is we need a follower for this. So it's basically a plate that's going to press down and keep the cheese in place. And of course we need to press this. Now I just want to add or comment on one little thing. That is, of course, what you're seeing here is working with improvised materials. This is stuff I just improvised myself, because I'm figure, well, making cheese for me, it's not really something that I do every day, each and every day. So I try to well, waste as little money on this as I can. I always think that it's a great philosophy when you're starting out a hobby, like working with meat, cheese, beer. Try and start as cheap and easy as possible. You never know when you might just not like it, get sick and tired, and want to do something else. So, but this is just some improvised materials. The follower I basically cut out of a very cheapo plastic cutting board, but it works a treat. So all we want to be doing is setting down a few weights. Now what I will be doing is putting on a few cans of just preserves, and on top of that I will actually be placing a few weights from a dumbbell. So this can just stand here for about, well, I think 4 to 6 hours, by which time we will have a nice cheese that's pressed into shape, and of course by which time we can indeed start to brine our cheese and salt it. Well guys, we're off to the last step of our cheese production, or at least one more step to go after this. But as you can see, our cheese came out of the mold, and she's a nice baby. She's about 1 kilo 600. Now the cheese is not yet 100% as firm as she will be in the end, but it's come together very well. That's what we're looking for. It will harden up as it will age, but what we want to be doing now, that is of course to, well, salt our cheese. And how we will do this, that'll be this way. So we want to put our cheese into a saltwater brine. This is going to soak in here overnight. I'll probably flip the cheese over before I go to bed, but this is going to soak overnight. Tomorrow morning we can get this out. I'll let it drain, and as a final point of our production, we will actually put a coating on our cheese. Good evening everyone. Now we're one day further, so as you can see, our cheese has had time to had its salt bath. I took it out this morning and allowed it to drain for a few hours. Now there's only one thing left to do. That would indeed be to coat our cheese. So for this, it's a commercial product I'm using, but we want to indeed apply this yellow product on top of the cheese, which will form a kind of protective layer on top of our cheese, and will form that little plasticky, there we go, layer that you see on a commercial grade cheese. Now this will basically seal our cheese from, well, any bacteria, mold or other stuff getting in. So I'm just going to let this side dry, then do the other ones. Again, this will seal our cheese, make it better to preserve. The only thing that will be left, well, that's to put this in a cool room where our cheese can actually mature for about 3 to 4 weeks for this size of cheese. After which we can actually let our cheese, or it's actually perfectly good to eat. Then we'll have young cheese. The only thing you want to do is once every 2-3 days we want to flip our cheese over so that it get an even drying on every side. But that's about our production process. As you see, not something too hard to do. I'd advise everyone, if you like cheese, just try this and enjoy, guys. We are indeed 4 weeks in, and as you can see, what we have is actually some, well, Houston, we got cheese. As you can see, the rind, I'll show you, there's a couple of little moldy spots on top. Now what I do, This does tend to happen if you don't have a perfectly controlled room, as they do in big cheese factories. So, but what I do is you wash this with salt water, and as soon as you actually get a good rind on the cheese, that should not be a problem at all. This just, well, as you can see, the cheese inside is nice and healthy. What I can do right now, well, I'm going to nicely slice this up, put this on some crusty buns, and enjoy a good breakfast. So as you can see, it's not very hard. In a few weeks time, just a little bit of patience, and you can make your own cheese. Just try this, guys, and well, enjoy the end product.